So if you've ever struggled to fill a critical role in your business and wondered whether bringing in skilled talent from overseas might be the answer, the very first step is becoming an approved business sponsor, and that's what we're unpacking today. My name's Kelvin. I'm here with Dali. Welcome to HR Clips. We help regional Australian businesses, help them understand, navigate the sponsorship and visa process. Over the next few minutes, we'll walk through what sponsorship is, what it involves, the costs, timeframes, and some of the pitfalls to avoid, so you can decide if it's the right step for your business. Dali, why sponsorship? What does sponsorship actually mean for a business?
So sponsoring an employee is a formal, approval from the Department of Home Affairs, and it allows businesses to hire overseas workers, whether they're coming from offshore or candidates who are already here in Australia. So it's a series of steps that are involved in sponsorship. So usually, there's a sponsorship, there's a nomination involved, and then there's also a visa application. So I suppose without that formal process, businesses can't legally employ foreign workers.
Yeah, I can't just hire a skilled worker.
That's right. Yeah. So you need to follow what, is required. So yeah, so normally businesses have to be, what they call a standard business sponsor, um, to be able to nominate and employ foreign workers in
Okay.
Australia.
And who can become a sponsor?
So any Australian business that's legally registered and operating here in Australia, they usually have to be here to be operating, within a certain amount of time. So usually 12 months or more, and obviously they need to be a legitimate business. So Australian migration regulation require employer sponsors to be if they are hiring foreign workers, it needs to be the role needs to be genuine, and you're not necessarily displacing local workers. Um, the worker that you're looking at and employing also needs to be paid fairly. So in Australia, it's called the AMSR, which is the Australian market salary rate. So it tends to be what the average salary is for their occupation. And the business also needs to meet their standard compliance. So that means they're like I said, they're running a legitimate business. They are registered and operating actively, and also they obviously pay their taxes and pay their staff members correctly. And that's usually reflected in their either their company documents, the business structure, and the employment conditions.
Yeah, so the department looks to make sure a business is genuine and financially sound before they'll approve
That's
it.
right. Mhm.
And does being in a regional area or under a Dharma change the criteria?
It does. It does in certain areas and certain occupations. So it varies across Australia depending on what Dharma region you're in. From memory, I believe there are 13 active Dharmas in Australia at the moment. But the one we're particularly focusing on would be the Dharma in the Orana region, which is in regional New South Wales. Um, so, depending on their occupation, as I've said, whether it's in aged care, hospitality, or agriculture, um, regional businesses do benefit from the Dharma concessions. So that can be, for example, lower English requirements or skill requirements or age, which is one of the big ones. So if a candidate won't qualify for a normal stream under, say, a 482 or a 494 186, usually they will turn to a Dharma, which is a labour agreement.
Okay, good. How does sponsorship fit into the bigger visa process? You did talk about the various stages. Do you want to just open that up a bit?
So which ones? Like the subclasses or?
Yeah, like the layers, the sponsorship layer, the nomination, and the visa. Just open up how sponsorship fits into that whole process.
Yeah, so normally what happens is once the business has been approved as a standard business sponsor, under whichever streams they elect for their company, um, once they've been approved, what normally happens is the company can now nominate applicants for sponsorship. Okay, depending on what they've offered the applicant, um, and in which areas that can also dictate, where the applicant's going to be working or where they need to relocate to, um, and for what occupation they're going to be nominated for. Um, so once that's done, once the nomination has been submitted, then the visa application would go in for the applicant themselves. And if it includes any family members, obviously that's critical as well. To include any spouses or children that may be involved in the process. And some companies do offer sponsorship not just to, the candidate, but sometimes they do also support the family members as well.
Yeah, good. And so do businesses apply for sponsorship once or every time they hire someone?
They're required, it's normally once, okay, and the sponsorship will last a couple of years. So any legally operating business in Australia can apply. So like you have mentioned, they need to be financially viable. So in saying that they'll need to provide BAS statements, profit and loss, their company, registration documents, and any other information that may be relevant to proving that they are legitimate business. Um, in terms of the role or the occupation, it needs to be genuine. So there needs to be, what they call a genuine need for the role. Um, and also the company needs to have a good, compliance history in terms of not underpaying their staff.
How far between the lodgements of sponsorship, nomination, and visa, or can they all be lodged together?
They can all be lodged together. Um, So, I mean, normally you have to put in the sponsorship first. You need to put the sponsorship first, and then the nomination can go in. Once the nomination's been approved, then usually there's a time frame where the visa application is required to be lodged. But, for the benefit of the candidate, they can wait, if they need to. Sometimes they may need to raise the funds to apply for the visa application themselves. Um, so that's something that they can do, but obviously within a certain time frame, or else their nomination will lapse, and then they won't have the chance to really apply for that visa application. No.
Fine. So what's the cost? How long does it take? Do you want to just talk us through what people should expect around sponsorship?
Yeah. So in terms of the government charges, so the sponsorship application is normally around 420 Australian dollars.
Yep.
In terms of the nomination fees for each person, it's around $330 Australian. Um, and there's also, what they refer to as a SAF levy, which is required to be paid by the company as well. But it is based on their turnover. So usually if it's 10 million, per annum turnover or less, it is usually 1,200 that's required by the company to be paid to the department. If it's 10 million or more, then it's about 1,800. And, in saying that, obviously there's, if you're going through a migration agent or migration lawyer, then the fees would, be dependent on that person or the company. Yeah.
No SAF
Mm.
levies per year and it's per nomination. Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Yeah.
And how long would the process usually take from starting the process to having someone working on site if it all went reasonably straightforward?
Look, if it's a reasonably straightforward application, the sponsorship approval would be anywhere between 1 to 2 months.
Yep.
It can be a bit longer if there are, further requests for documents from the department. But a straightforward application would be, 1 to 2 months. Yeah. And then in terms of the nomination and the visa application, it can range anywhere from, 2 to 6 months, depending on the stream and, the applicant's location as well. Obviously there are also nominations and visa applications that can be submitted on behalf of companies who are considered accredited sponsors. So usually they have a large cohort of candidates or staff members working for them. And they're usually bigger companies that may seek to be accredited. Yeah, but on a small scale, it would be, sponsorship approval 1 to 2 months and nomination visa application 2 to 6 months. Yeah.
Depending on the visa and stream. Righto.
That's
And
right.
what are some of the risks and obligations as a sponsor?
So the companies who are considered as sponsors will need to, first of all, pay what is the market salary for the occupation. So currently, since the 1st of July 2025, the threshold for the salary for nominating a candidate is 76515. So an employer must pay that minimum in order to qualify as a sponsor, and that's their obligation. So it could be that or more. Anything less than that will not be accepted, and chances are the application would be refused. The other thing they need to, the other point employers need to consider is they need to keep records and notify of any changes in the employment conditions for the candidate. Avoid any unlawful deductions in their pay. And cooperate if there are any audits required. So in terms of the pay, obviously that's a big one. They need to pay the equivalent to what an Australian worker would receive, which is essentially more or less the same. And the employment contract definitely needs to dictate those details as well, that they've been given more or less the same working conditions as a local Australian employee.
Yeah, good. What are the consequences if a sponsor doesn't meet their obligations?
So they would risk, sponsorship cancellation. There may be sanctions or fines imposed on the company. Obviously, it can also damage their reputation as well, which is one of the things. And they may not be, eligible to sponsor in the future.
That's probably the big one. Okay, good. So with the options for regional employers like Dharma and the like, is there any words of wisdom on that you could talk us through?
I think the Dharma is good to consider for businesses, whether small or large, because it definitely offers a pathway for people who cannot meet the requirements for the mainstream applications. So, as I've mentioned before, concessions on English skills, salary in certain occupations, and age requirements. So, there also may be access to occupations that are not listed on the standard occupations list. And the great thing is if a regional business is struggling to fill roles locally, they can, turn to Dharma as a consideration for their business. Yeah.
Yep. So it's mainly job specific where the advantage is rather than ease of applying.
Yes, yeah. So if they do, and you do find every now and again there are companies who really struggle to fill the positions in regional areas, and given the location, it may be a remote town or somewhere outside of a bigger metropolitan city. And one of their considerations is to hire, those who are willing to relocate to those regions, whether maybe local domestic candidates or international ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And we see it all the time, don't we? Like a tyre fitting shop that just has not been able to get staff, and they get the sponsorship, and
Yes.
they've got five skilled immigrants there. They're qualified mechanics even. They're happy. They've got a great attitude. They're always available. They turn up every day, and the
Absolutely.
business can grow, can
Yes.
scale, and it can take it to the next level because they can make decisions with certainty that they can get the staff. That's very skilled.
That's right.
There's definitely a way forward for the regional businesses. So if someone's interested in progressing down this road, what's the first thing they should do?
I think what the first thing you should do is, if it's a business, you would assess their business eligibility.
Yep.
Whether they can sponsor someone. Um, the other requirement you'd want to look at as well is you'd want to check or review the occupations list and salary benchmarks for each occupation. So that will give you an idea of, what a company is expected to pay the candidate. And also, I guess the final thing is, yeah, you'll need to discuss um, any of those inquiries in detail with a migration agent or migration lawyer, and they'd be able to take you through step by step what is needed and what's required for an Australian business to sponsor a foreign national.
Yeah, it's definitely the easiest way to get it right first time. Get those staff here as soon as you need, as soon as possible, so that you can use them to save you more time and money. So we're here to help at HR
Yes.
Clip. I'll put a link in the notes below. But thanks for watching.